Hello, good morning, everyone. This is Binta Sisi, Admin and Finance Assistant, Gambia Center for Research and Policy Studies. I am so excited about this webinar. It is finally here on the topic ethics and morality in the sustainable development of the Gambia. I welcome you all to this webinar. Okay, so first we will go straight. We cannot afford to delay. Um, okay, first we have Mr. Vicente Gomez. He's our moderator for the day. Vicente Gomez is the BSc holder in English or Literature and History. He is also a lover of sports. He has a background in he loves flora and fauna, and then that's why he has a seed academy, which is a community-based organization. We welcome Mr. Vicente Gomez to the program.
Thank you very much, Binta.
To our panelists, we have Mr. Bishop Bani Manga, known in the Gambia as Bishop Manga, who is well known in the Christian fraternity. Mr. Bani Manga has a master's in applied theology, and he is well recognized here in the Gambia. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Binta, and wish you all the best.
Wish you all the best. Thank you. Okay, third on the list, we have Dr. Banna Sawane. Dr. Banna Sawane is also a doctorate holder in public administration. He is the head of senior researcher at the Center for Research and Strategic Studies, CEPRAS. You're welcome, Mr. Banna Sawane, Doctor, sorry.
Yes, thank you very much,
Binta,
for inviting us to this very important event.
Fourth on the list, we have Dr. Raymond Jata. Dr. Raymond Jata as well is a doctorate holder in economics. He's well recognized when it comes to the side of agriculture, food and safety. We can entrust him when it comes to food and safety. His experience is unquestionable. You're so welcome, Dr. Raymond Jata.
Thank you very much, Binta.
We are excited to have you here.
I am excited too.
Thank you. Okay, so our final panelist for the day is Dr. Omar Jah, Professor Dr. Omar Jah. He also has a doctorate in comparative law and Islamic civilization. You're so welcome, sir. He's also recognized in the University of the Gambia as well as the Gambia College. You're so welcome, sir.
Associated with this platform. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Okay, so I hope this webinar is going to be a great success, and a lot of us will have to learn a whole lot of stuff from this webinar, bringing from the students, researchers, policymakers. I hope that the event is a success. Thank you so much.
Pleased to have this topic, ethics and morality for the Gambia's sustainable development. And the themes today are diligence, discipline, and drive in workplaces. And we'll definitely be glad to hear from our own bishop talking about that. And then we have compliance, accountability, and probity in workplaces, where Banasawane will come in, and employer-employee obligation in workplaces with Dr. Raymond Jata, and justice, equity, and fairness in workplaces with our very own erudite Professor Omar Jah. So we will start with Bishop on your topic today. Bear with us. We only have about 1 hour, 30 minutes. So I would hate to really restrain any one of you, knowing that you can definitely go beyond an hour presenting your own topics. But because we are bereft of time, we'll definitely have to work within the guideline that we have right now. So each one of you will have to at least take 3 minutes to tell us about your own topic, after which we'll definitely move on to you doing a presentation of about six minutes for each of the questions we have for you before we maybe open up to those following us to ask you questions or additional whatever from whatever we may have heard from you before we would actually wrap up the day. So, Bishop, we start with you on diligence, discipline, and drive in workplaces. What do you have to actually share with us before we get into the subject matter itself?
Well, thank you very much, Vicente. And I'm wondering why I'm starting when we have all these professors with us. I thought they were going to start and we'll learn from them. But thank you for giving me this platform to share a few thoughts on diligence, discipline, and drive within the workplace. We must have to establish that the Gambia is called the smiling coast of Africa. Well, I was saying we all grew up here in Gambia knowing that Gambia is called the smiling coast. Maybe because of our smiles, we have the ethos, the Gambia no problem. But given that the context in which this dictum is understood and appreciated, one can argue that our people have developed a mentality of seeking to satisfy everyone at any given time and space. Beautiful and pastoral as this may be, I want to suggest that a lot of our young people who have soaked themselves within the context of music need to be reminded of what Bob Marley said. And Bob Marley said, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind. Within this context, we need to understand that for us to have a sustained development within the context of our nation, we should be diligent, we should be disciplined, and we should have drive in our workplace. But for us to do that, we need to understand, get an understanding of work and the workplace. First and foremost, we need to understand that we are a religious people, and it is God who has called us when He created humanity to say, take care of the earth, subdue it, be good stewards of it. And so our understanding of work must be premised on the fact that God has allowed us to participate in what He is doing so that our nation or our context can be better. Now, if we appreciate that it is God who has given us this opportunity, then whatever we do, we should do it appreciating that we are first and foremost accountable to God. We are first and foremost accountable to God's people before we are also accountable to ourselves. Now, bearing in mind that it is God who has called us to do work and to make the earth a better place, then whatever we do in the context of work should be to satisfy God. We shouldn't wait until somebody's looking over us before we start doing what is right. We always know that God is above us and God is watching us. So our diligence to work is because God has called us and told us that we should make this earth a better place. That is point number one. The second thing is God has called us to be a steward. And if we understand what is a steward is someone who takes care of somebody else's business. Now, in the Bible, in Psalm 24, verse 1, we're told the earth is the Lord and the fullness thereof. So we are literally called to take care of God's creation. Now, if you are entrusted with somebody's property, somebody's work, somebody's estate, then you must be accountable to that person. Now, since we cannot run away from God in any form, shape, or time, then it means that whenever we are entrusted with work, especially within the context of our nation, we should do it first and foremost as a religious duty unto God, and we should also do it as unto our fellow neighbor, because our work is to make someone else better. Now, a philosopher would say, in Africa, we have the dictum, I am because we are. So if I am because we are, then it means that when I'm working, I am the servant of the other person, and the other person is servant to me. So if we all see ourselves as being servant one to another, then I would suggest that when we go to work, we would realize that we have an obligation to make life better for the other person. We have an obligation to make life better for the future. We have an obligation to make life better for ourselves. We have an obligation to our community. In that context, I want to suggest that we need to look at what are some of the catalysts to poverty. Structural imbalances. And structural imbalances exist because humanity has created it. So if we have created it, then we can also solve it. Other issue that is that there are environmental issues. There are demographical factors. Then there is the problem of structural injustice embodied in the realities of globalization. But we can always sit as people of God and want to blame other people. Oh, we are what we are because of other people. We must, as a people, take a definite conscious decision to say, we are going to make sure we change the narrative. How do we change the narrative? If you do what is right and I do what is right, then there will be a society that will be doing what is right. If you do what is what you is accountable to God and someone else does what is accountable to God, then we would move in there. But the truth of the matter is, most times as Gambians, we have this masla concept. Oh, I don't want to offend this person, and because I don't want to offend this person, then it is all right, just by correct, didn't understand. But if we want our context to go on and to be better, then I would suggest that the words of Professor Kwesi Dixon should be alluded to. He says, our country's socio-economic and political situation determines the space in which our Christian or religious convictions must be exercised. A social concern is imperative. To think otherwise is to misread the scriptures. This means that our theological enterprise, our quest to serve God, must be rooted on our faith, must be rooted in what we do, so that we don't only be a people who would speak good grammar, but we will be a people who will live that which we believe. As a nation that is anchored on God, God is calling us to be a people that will be determined, that will be disciplined. You don't have to wait for someone to police you before you do what is right. You are called to live what is right. And what is right is found in the tenets of our faith. What is right is found in what we believe in. And then let us be reminded that it was Jesus who said a story: to whom much is given, much is required. And to us as Gambians, we have been given enough opportunity to change our story. It is about time we be motivated to know that Gambia can only be developed if us as Gambians decide to work. You know, when we were growing up, there was this song, Takul Ligay, Jatna. I think it is about time for us all to tackle Sundiga, and realize that Gambia can only be developed if we're diligent, if we're disciplined, and if we have drive, if we're hungry that our nation should be seen in a new light. And that new light is not in the hands of the politicians, it's in the hands of all of us as Gambians. Thank you very much.
Wow, the new light is not in the hands of the politicians, but all of us. That's a take home for every one of us. Thank you very much, Bishop. Thank you very much. I can't actually go on to summarize all you've said, but you've talked about structural imbalance, demographic factors, and us actually changing the narrative and not leaving it in the hands of politicians, as well as us definitely doing away with the Maslaha syndrome to ensure that we follow that which governs and guides each and every one of us, and that we don't need to be policed to do what is right, right? And that to whom much is given, much is expected from. But I've also heard that to whom much is expected from, much is given. You are a bishop because they expect so much from you. Can you please share with us your remarks on this before you get into the question about shared experiences and to examine the significance of compliance accountability, and probity in our civil service, among other institutions. Over to you, my own prof.
Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. Um, First, we start with workplace compliance. This is a very important issue as far as our organizations, both public and private organizations, are concerned. Actually, workplace or internal organizations compliance is the act of adhering to protocols, rules, and regulations, and or codes of operation or conduct in the workplace. So that means employees are obliged to adhere to whatever rules and regulations that might have been crafted or approved for them to follow as they perform their work in various organizations. So the workplace could be under public or private setting, like I said, and the workplace compliance framework helps organizations to maintain operating standards and avoid internal conflicts. Because if there is no compliance to internal procedures, protocols, rules, and regulations, then there's likelihood of conflict arising. So to regulate and bring sanity to organizational atmosphere, it is important that we have compliance to these rules and regulations. In connection to the Gambia's public service and with specific emphasis or connection to public enterprises, the Code of Conduct, the Code of Good Corporate Governance for state-owned enterprises, for instance, which is 2016 to 2020 in the Gambia, revealed the recently PACPEC conclusions that have drawn attention to many shortcomings in the SOE's performance, governance, and management, particularly financial management. And several issues were identified. Time may not allow me to go into detail of these issues that are identified by FPAC and FPEC Committee of the National Assembly regarding some of our public institutions, public enterprises, and agencies. So it is important that we have compliance at the workplace, and it helps us to tap certain benefits, which include stability and workplace security, for instance. When employees comply with the norms, values, as well as rules and regulations or protocols of an organization, it helps drive productivity and employee engagement and moral as well as corporate trust. Trust here is quite important. Our scripture, for instance, the Quran tells us about trust and warns us against betraying trust. For instance, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran in Surah Al-Anfal, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la taqunu Allah wa rasuluhu wa la taqunu amanatikum wa antum ta'lamun. Those of you who believe, please do not betray Allah and his messenger, and do not betray trusts been given to you. Knowingly betraying trust given to you is a breach of contract between human beings and their Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's important that we maintain trust as employees in our various organizations. Compliance also helps us to boost organizational reputation. When you are compliant to organizational rules and regulations, it helps to prevent organizational or reputational damage because no one knows the degree of ramifications for breaching organizational protocols, rules, and issues of ethics and codes of conduct. It also helps organizations to save money, for instance. It becomes costly when employees of a particular organization, be it public or private organizations, to breach organizational rules and regulations, which may lead to issues of litigation or lawsuits whatsoever, and reputational damage. And the organization may spend a lot of money to either lawyers or to the courts. So it helps balance priorities and promotes employee accountability, behaving ethically, etc. And then protecting sensitive data. Employees need to be compliant to rules that protect private data, sensitive data, because if they breach these compliance procedures, it can be damaging. So it's important that employees are compliant. Without wasting much time, I move on to the issue of accountability in the workplace. Actually, accountability refers to employees taking responsibility for their actions, for their tasks, behaviors, performance, and decisions. This means that an employee should take a responsibility and become responsible for his or her actions, including its outcomes. So you become accountable. As public servants or civil servants, we are accountable to the citizens. We are accountable to the population. And this is what makes us civil servants or public servants. And even those who are working in the private sector, they are still accountable to the public because they are serving, their products are meant for the public consumption. As a result, they are accountable to the public. The 1997 Constitution on the Directive Principles of State Policy, Section 214, subsection 5, states clearly that the actions of government, including agents, employees, workers, should be carried out in line with or with due regard to the principles of an openness. Transparency calls for openness and should foster accountability and transparency at all levels. This is from the 1997 Constitution, that we need to be transparent, we need to be accountable in our work and in various organizations, institutions, agencies, and even the mainstream civil service. Audit takes place within a defined set of rules or laws, and auditors are equally accountable to these laws and professional standards. It is a constitutional mandate that auditing of public accounts is conducted. And this is governed by Section 158 to 160 of the 1997 Constitution of the Gambia, which provides for the appointment of an Auditor General and the setting up of National Audit Office. The Companies Act 2013, Companies Act of 2013 provides the authority for the audit of companies, and the Public Finance Act 2014, which requires the Auditor General to lay audited accounts before Public Accounts Committee of the National Assembly, while placing audit reports, financial statements, activity reports before the Public Accounts Committee or Public Enterprises Committee of the National Assembly. Is because these institutions are owned by the state. These institutions are accountable and answerable to the citizens of the country. To make them accountable for their actions, their behaviors, their performance in these agencies, organizations, they need to present to the National Assembly, because the populace are represented by National Assembly members to scrutinize their activities, to ensure probity in the way that they conduct public trust, because it is a trust. They are given a trust to carry out. The Gambian public relies on the National Audit Office through the Constitution and Acts of National Assembly, including Public Finance Act 2014 and the Financial Reporting Act of 2013, to hold those in charge of public funds accountable through their audits, which provides independent, unbiased professional audit opinions to the National Assembly's Public Accounts Committee. This is to say that audit reports are generated from the expert opinions of auditors, expert opinions of those who peruse these organizational documents, financial statements, financial documents. So it is out of an expert opinion. And those expert opinions are unbiased. They must be respected. It's not just coming out to say, okay, this is this. No, they are people who are trained in their field and they are experts. And when they give a judgment on a particular institution's activity or financial statement or reports, then it is considered an expert opinion, which must be respected by the citizens, respected by public servants, civil servants at any level. So citizens are informed through audits on the compliance of those responsible for managing public funds with the financial, procurement, and fiscal rules and regulations and relevant laws of the Gambia. This is enshrined in the 1997 Constitution as the right of all citizens. And this is why we also have, for procurement issues, we have the Gambia Public Procurement Authority to ensure that public institutions comply with the procurement protocols and procedures of the country, because it is a law. The World Bank Report 2021 on the Gambia Integrated State-Owned Enterprises Framework, ISOF, assessment reveals that there is very low levels of transparency and accountability in the actions of the state-owned enterprises. Facing such challenges and considering the strategic role of SOEs in providing key infrastructure and public services, it is vital to ensure that SOEs follow good corporate governance, practice of accountability, and transparency in order to realize its potentials. So, why is it important for us to foster accountability? Because it promotes trust among employees. When employees are accountable for their actions and behaviors, we don't have a lackluster attitude towards carefree attitudes of people or public servants, civil servants in our institutions. It usually builds trust between and among individuals and teams. So employees feel they can rely on the team members to perform their duties correctly, and enhances performance and improves organizational culture and fosters integrity, honesty, and diligence, right? So honesty and integrity are integral part of our codes of conduct, our documents, our constitution, and in fact, our holy books. For instance, the Quran, the Rasul said, Prof. Jack can correct me if I'm wrong, he said, "Innama bu'ithtu li'utammima makarimul akhlaq," that he was being sent for us as a very exemplary character, for him to complete that exemplary character for us. So he himself is exemplary in character, and followers of Rasul need to be exemplary in their character as well in these organizations. But the moment we breach these protocols and procedures, it becomes difficult for us to uphold the principles and protocols of integrity, honesty, and diligence in our organizations. So that means we need to be honest, we need to be ethical, morally ethical in our conducts, and avoid those carefree attitude to work.
You talked about adherence in terms of compliance, and in that case, it brings in stability, trust, and it avoids reputational damage, as well as saving a lot of money, and promotes ethical behavior. Talking about ethics and morality, I was listening to our own Professor Saliu Bojang Mfa, and he talked about morality being something that a person actually shows, and ethics being that which the workplace actually sets as rules, regulations, or code of conduct. Prof, yours is on justice, equity, and fairness in workplaces. And you are to actually share with us some of the factors one would consider at workplace in relation to justice, equity, and fairness.
Thank you, Dr. Bizante. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wa sallallahu wa sallim ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmain. Allow me first and foremost to express my profound gratitude to the organizers of this platform, of this very, very important get-together, intellectual get-together. I'm so proud. Academicians normally, they are not rich, they don't have cash, but what they have is the legacy. When they look back to see that the values they inculcated in the students is mushrooming out and flourishing. And this is what we have seen in you. I'm really, really, really proud. And thank you for having me in mind when you organize this very important with my brothers and sisters, especially the panelists, my friend Bishop and Dr. Jata. I'm sorry, Vicente was my student, so he still feel that thing. So, and Dr. Bana Sawane, I'm really proud to meet you all. I have been asked to make some jottings on justice, equity, and fairness in workplaces. My paper is divided into an introduction. It's just a very short paper. In an introduction, which is diagnostic, and meaning of the key terminologies, as well as the essentials of the topic, which, of course, we will maybe come later when we answer the questions, and the conditions attached to each one of these essentials to make our workplace efficient and up to the par, and a conclusion. In the introduction, there are some points just I want to make. Point number one is, even though full of slogans like MDGs, SDGs, and many other slogans to come, the fact of the matter is that the current world order is established on fundamentals that are neither fair to nature, nor fair also to the weak nations among ourselves. And Gambia being part of Africa, we are in that tight corner, not being apologetic, but we have to understand the situation in which we work to be able to untrap ourselves. When people go, we go an extra mile to untrap ourselves in this situation and take off with the new paradigm. In that sense, the new point is saying now, the point number two is saying, even though there are many slogans, progress and development of any people is internal, but not external. If we keep depending on hands out, we will never get efficient workplace in our countries. Point three in that introduction say, due mainly to the absence of justice, equity, and fairness, progress and development seem elusive in Africa, of which the Gambia is part of. Are we fair to our product? Because when you talk of workplace, then it is premised on the work culture. When you talk of a work culture, it's premised as something bigger, on the people we produce. Are we fair to our age? Look at our curricula. Look at our educational system. People are talking about going to the fifth industrial revolution. Are we now producing for that? These are questions that talk about not only to be fair to ourselves, but also fair to the age. And point number four, there is a difference between the rule of law and the rule of ethics. And I think the bishop put it very rightly, that when you perform in fear of the law, then you can be termed as good. But to be the best, you have to perform in fear of your conscience. And that is number four. Number five in the introduction, and it is here where the problems lies, because while most people perform in workplaces only for fear of the rule of law, few of us are driven by the tenets of the rule of ethics. This paper that I have hypothesizes that in order to eliminate the ills and the vices of nepotism, favoritism, corruption, negligence, and disrespect for workplaces, our employers and the employees need a strong booster beyond the current sociological framework. And this is very important. And number seven in the introduction is, there are three categories of workers: the bad, the good, and the best. Maybe in our final thing, we will really decode them. Then when you come to the second point, which is the key terminologies and the meaning of the keywords, you have justice. Justice is the cardinal principle to which other values are measured. The more of justice you give me, the more of peace and stability you should expect in the offices and everywhere. And the less of justice, the less of peace and stability. I think I can stop there. Injustice. When it comes to equity, I like the terminology equity, because during the many domestication of our laws in the Gambia, especially when it comes to gender imbalances, I really prefer equity rather than equality, because treating unequals equally is a form of injustice. And here justice comes again. To treat unequals equally is a form of injustice. So when you come to gender parity and all that, I think the issue of equity is very, very, very important. Today, for example, we have in the Gambia, when during Ramadan, women should leave at 2 o'clock earlier than men, even though they may not be cooking. If a gentleman now stand and say, no, 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 we have to be treated equally. We have to leave at 2 o'clock. Then now you are talking about equality. But treating unequals equally is a form of injustice. Then you come now to fairness. Fairness is very important. These terms are very interconnected. But fairness here, I want to just drive it to fairness to the institution. Most of the time, we want to be fair to ourselves as employees. We want to be fair to ourselves as employers, looking into the contract that binds us together, but we are not fair to the institutions. Sometimes we want some promotion prematurely. Sometimes we look at our budget, you look at the emolument, and the payroll is skyrocketing, but the other items in the other item in the budget is just squeezed. Then we are not fair to the institutions. And if you want to have a healthy workplace, we have to be fair to the institutions. Then the third point in the paper talk about the essentials, the pillars of the paper. That is the agent, which is the employer and the employees. Secondly, the contract. The contract is the paper that binds us together, that we have to respect. Third, workplace is the domain in which we have to project all these values. And then fourth is the idea of law and the idea of morality and ethics. Then you come to the conditions. That's the fifth point in the paper. The conditions attached on each one of these essentials to make our workplace really acceptable. Here, a verse of the Holy Quran, Allah is saying, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu awfu bil uqud. O you who believe. And we are now speaking to the generation, to the people of believers. As the bishop just talked about it, we are a religious society, whether we like it or not. We are Muslims and Christians. So here, Allah is saying, O you who believe, fulfill the tenets of your contract. Respect your promise. There are three things here. To fulfill the promise. Second, to fulfill it to the best of our ability, meaning to approximate perfection. Even though we cannot be perfect, but we have to gradually try to approximate perfection. And third, this is the address to the heart. That is why if you are working with the conscience to understand that you are not monitored by the CCTV cameras, but you are monitored by Allah, no matter how much artificial intelligence you have, no matter how much CCTV cameras you have, no matter how much Internet of Things that we are working with today, none of these can monitor and detect your intention the moment you wake from your bed. When you wake up from your bed, what occurs to you internally is something that these CCTVs cannot detect. Your clock in, clock out mechanism cannot detect. What detects that is the one who created you, the intelligent designer of the universe. So you have to very much understand and conscious that he monitors you at your place of work. You cannot hide. So this is something that then the ayah is talking about. You monitor yourself, you work, not because you fear your boss, but you know that somebody is watching you that you cannot hide. Then here, the other things about the contract. When you come to the contract, is the conditions attached to the contract is clarity of the TORs. And it must be based on well thought out organogram, on conditions of service. These are things that if we come to the next question, maybe we can dilate on. Because if you have a contract that is very vague, there is no very clear TORs, there is no organogram, which is respecting the scaling and all that, then it's a problem. And the other one is a workplace. The workplace must have a clean and conducive environment for work. The workplace must have a standard privileges in terms of sitting arrangement, office furniture, and timing in and out. All these are things and many, many more in the workplaces. If you want to have a workplace, a measurable criteria for fairness and justice and equitable. And in the conclusion of the paper, I just said there are three categories of workers: the bad, the good, and the best. And I know in the question we will definitely decode them. Finally, I said there is a code. I say work on yourself harder than the work on your job. If you work hard on your job, you make a living. But if you work harder on yourself, you could make a fortune. In this age, increase your market value by increasing your skill. And thank you very much for your attention.
Wow. Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you very much. We are so glad to really have you around. And our take home here is working on ourselves more than working on our job. And that definitely is something we will take home. Justice, equity, and fairness. Let's be fair to the institution and not just look at ourselves. And that justice promotes peace and stability in the workplace. And of course, equity is not equality, because treating equally is a form of injustice. Prof, I cannot really summarize all you've said, but we really appreciate this, and we hope and pray that those following us, those watching, and those who will be watching later will definitely learn something that will help them and also help them in their workplaces. Thank you very much. So, Prof, let me go to your second question so that you can exhaust your part. In case your time to breakfast is near, you may be excused. Yes. So, yes, thank you very much for being there. So the second one actually is workplace leadership comes with a level of importance that ensures every employee has a clear vision of where an organization should be. Strategic plan. How do we ensure there is actual intent behind choosing leaders who serve this purpose and not anything superficial of attributes like gender, age, tribe, ethnicity, among others?
Thank you very much. You see, every employee is an employer. And that has to be put very much bluntly for people to understand. Every employer turns to be an employee. For example, the president, who is now at the head of state. But when you come to employing mechanism, the agent, the most powerful is the public service. But the head of the public service is the president. And him being a role model, under him you have the ministers. This role model, they are also employees, right? Because they are employed by the people, and they have to be regulated by the constitution and the TORs of their appointment, as well as their consent. So if the importance of a CEO or how to call it, a leader for any establishment is that he's like a captain. He's like a captain, because in any ship, the captain must be visionary. And the captain must also look at a what we call meritocracy. So, for example, when you look at the thing that make Singapore exceptionally good, they talk about meritocracy. So the thing, to decode the essentials of the workplace, this is where you also can identify who is the best leader in terms of vision, because you have to have the vision, not only a sight, but a vision. You have to be selfless. Here, when I talk about the workplace, I think cleaning, conducive environment. So the leader must make sure now that the workplace is clean with a conducive environment to work. He has to put standardized privileges, because normally when you have people working for you and you give people different privileges, this is also creating some imbalances that will not help, for example, the health and the efficiency of the office. Standardization of privileges in terms of sitting arrangement, office furniture, and timing of in and outing of, for the services that you render. Also, in terms of clarity of procedure, it is the responsibility of the leader to put a very clear procedure of promotion and all that. Respecting precedent set, because when you come as a leader, a good leader must respect the precedent set already, because you cannot depart from precedent like that. Otherwise, you will be, you will be found wanting. And training of staff, the leader also is the one who can train his staff. Conducting performance auditing, because sometimes in the Gambia, those who work hard and those who work lazily, there is no criterion measurable to conduct a performance audit and recognize those that are performing and definitely scold those that are not performing. That's why a leader must have conducting performance auditing, recognizing excellency, because those who make excellently, you have to be recognized. Timely promotion of meritorious people, respecting hierarchical chain of command. As a leader, you are respected, but also respect the people you appoint on the subcommittees. For example, as a CEO, you have certain officer directors. Don't bypass a director. Don't give a director a responsibility, and then the next day you bypass him by calling those under the director. That is not good for any leader. So you have to respect the chain of command if you want those people also to respect you. Hierarchical chain of command, equitable and timely sharing of information. A leader of any office must share information. The information must trickle down. But if you hoard information, there will always be rumors from the staff that this is happening, that is happening. You have to trickle information, but based on the level that they need to know. Of course, there are information that you trickle down, but as much as they need to know for the functioning of the office, you have to trickle that information. That is the type of leader. And finally, and particularly, demarcate the line between personal and job relationships. The problem we have is that sometimes you are working with your brother, you are working with your sister, you are working with your uncle, and now you cannot demarcate the line between the relationship of your sister and your brother and your uncle and the job. You know, I have seen that when I was working at the University of the Gambia, my professor was he's my cousin, but we used to fight inside office, fight very much when it comes to the requirements of the job. So you have to eliminate the relationship of whatever relationship, as long as the establishment has a legal personality, he has certain rights that you have to observe. And these are the things that we have to look in any leader who is able to do that. Thank you very much.
Talked about vision or visionary leadership, merit, standard, and respect of procedures, and as well as code of conduct, you know, and training of, succession, because that's another thing. A lot of people can lead, but they don't have actually successors. And a good leader is who actually has somebody who comes and takes over and outperforms him whilst he was there, and actually respecting excellence and distinguishing between the person and the job or the relationship, as well as what is public and private. Thank you very much, Prof.
Like we have lost Mr. Vicente. Dr. Raymond, we would want to give you the floor so that you can also give us some little bit. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Good afternoon. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes, we hear you. We hear you well.
All right. Thank you. I tried to project here, but it seems my slides are not showing.
They are coming.
Okay.
They are coming.
So
I'm seeing them.
To the very first slide. All right. Thank you. So let me say first, I am very honored to share this platform with such highly educated and highly experienced speakers like you, and also to the listeners or to those that are participating online. Thank you very much for creating this time, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. Maybe this is the first time I am participating in such a highly honored forum like this. But I want to say that the topic that I have been assigned to is really very important. It's about employer-employee obligations in the workplace. The reason why I think it's important, and it is policy, it's important for policy, is that number one, maybe you can go to the next slide. Number one, labor is the main asset of the poor. Normally for the poor, it's the labor that they have. It is their hands and their brains that they have to offer. And most of the time, making the labor market a more efficient pathway out of poverty is a policy challenge that remains poorly understood and sorely neglected in policy making. Because number one, you have to identify who are the poor, where the poor lives, and what they do for you to be able to target them. Um, when the poor are only regarded as people living in the rural areas and working in areas such as agriculture, this often excludes the increasingly urban and skilled and unskilled labor force in the urban and growing centers. So in our discussion as to who the poor is, we need to be a little bit thinking out of the box and thinking beyond, the rural poor, but also even the urban poor. And in the Gambia, 56% of the Gambia's population is living in the urban areas and making their livelihood. They source it from employment that they seek or employment that they give. So it's for me. I think it's really a very important discourse. If we are going to look at policy and look at how we are going to make inroads as a country, we also need to look at these employee and employer relationships to the extent that through we know that most of the employees are the people that are poor, and what they have is the assets is their labor that they provide. In basic economics, we have been taught that the factors of production can be grouped into land, labor, capital, and management. And the returns to land are rent, for wage for labor, they are wages. But what is important is that um, we know that labor is one of the most important factors of production that controls all the other factors of production. Or the human person or the human resource is the most important factor of production. When we invest in the human person, that can enhance innovation. We invest in their training and organizing the workplaces, like Professor have said, that will lead to factor productivity. So increasing the factor productivity. So for every human person that we employ, how much that individual is able to generate. And that in effect will increase our growth as a country. It's important to note that poor labor standards hamper productivity and affect the rights of workers. So if we don't have an organized labor force, an organized employee and employer relationship, that will hamper productivity and then hamper growth. The important policy connect that maybe Prof have said a lot about it already is that the employer and the employee are connected through a contract, and this contract shows the TOR, the terms of reference, as to what gets done when, how much of it, how much is going to be paid, when is the payment going to be done, in what environment the work is going to be implemented. But I think beyond the contract, you also have the rule of law. So the laws that pertain how employees are remunerated and when and all those kinds of things. In the Gambia, we have the Labor Act, we have the general orders that defines these kinds of relationships beyond what we have in the contracts. So my simple TOR is that if we have very clear employment relationships defined in agreements and in contracts, backed with these overarching laws, we would be able to have an efficient labor force that then lead to the slide before, that then leads to other gains in society, such as social protection. We would be able to protect society as a result of these employee-employer relationships. We'll be able to have stable employment, full employment, equity and fairness, and also growth through taxes that we pay. And that's why I think it's really a very, very important policy discourse, and something that is important for the Gambia to take note of. Like I said, most of the urbanized population are people that are relying on others to employ them. And for us to target poverty and to make inroads in poverty, we have poverty reduction, we have to target those people. So just to give you an example, even in the Gambia labor force survey, you can see the number of employed people in the urban areas are more than in the rural areas. 282,000 people employed, where in the urban areas more than in the rural areas. I think there's a slight mistake there. And then the number of male are more employed than the female, of course, maybe from the patriarchal society that we come from. And then you can also see the disaggregation in terms of the the sources of employment or the sectors that uh, people in the Gambia are employed in. The employment rate is at 64%. And then you can see in areas such as construction, agriculture, retail, that's where a lot of employment is being generated. But it's important to note that 64% of households, this was what I took as a take home, 64% of households in the urban areas were engaged in informal activities. So if 64% of households are engaged in informal activities, that then behoves on us for us to regulate that informality and make sure that there is some level of formality. Um, and also the next that other slide there show that a lot of us are employment seekers and not employment generators. So maybe if we ask around those that are listening here and those that are participating, how many of us are creating employment in our own right? I have an experience working out of the country, but most of my colleagues, apart from the work that they do, have their other forms of businesses through which they employ others. Maybe in the Gambia, this is something that we also need to learn and ensure that even as civil servants, we are also able to generate some level of employment for others. The Labor Act show the rights and obligations of employees and rights and obligations of employers. As I went through the Labor Act, what I saw was that I think the Labor Act was really very comprehensive. There are lots and lots of information that you can derive from the Labor Act, such as what Prof talked about as to the work environment, the responsibility of ensuring that there is training for employees by the employer, the responsibility of creating good TORs and organograms um, that defines how people report to the unit of command and all those kinds of things, but also the responsibility of the employer to make sure that he or she reports to work on time and is regular, and also enhance productivity. So all of these things are enshrined in the Labor Act of 2019. The problem is how much of that Labor Act is implemented, how much of that Labor Act is known by the people that are providing employment and the people that are seeking employment. The next slide. So these are all the rights and obligations of employees and employers. I have made this available to the organizers. Maybe we will share this after the presentation. So next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, so some of the challenges that I observed, or as I interacted with the people and asked questions, even at the Ministry of Trade, is that there is limited knowledge and application of the labor laws. Most of the people do not know about these labor laws, and as a result, there is a limitation to which they are applied. So normally, we would have these good laws or good regulations, but implementing them becomes a problem because people do not know about them. There is increasing reliance of the poor on casual labor due to urbanization in the Gambia. And because of this, there is weak bargaining, poor wages, and also non-continuity of some of these sources of employment. So one of the examples is in the tourist season, is in the tourist industry, where a lot of people are employed, but employed only during the season. And also the short-term construction, the work or the employment that is generated in the area of construction which is normally very short term, and it's a lot very, very informal. So increasing informality, especially in short contracts where there are no social security payments or no taxes that are being paid. And also we have recently a large influx of foreign nationals that are coming into the Gambia and competing in that employee employment workspaces. Um, at the organizational level, there is also what is called mandate creep. So I give an example of the tourist development area, in which for I think this is happening for the this is not happening in a lot of places, but the Gambia, we have what is called the tourism development area. It is 800 meters out of beyond the high water mark along the coast. So any land area in that dimension is regarded as the tourism development area. But within the tourism development area, there are lots of land uses and land and claims over land. Government is taking ownership or claim ownership of that land. Even the sectors within government, the Ministry of Lands, the Ministry of Forestry, the Ministry of Wildlife, the Ministry of Fisheries, all of them have control over these lands. And then there are always very competing land uses, very incompatible land uses. In some sectors, in some ministries, you would have two PSs, PS1 and PS2. Each one of them is competing over the other. And really that needs to be regulated. The other thing is that Professor also spoke about was this absence of performance-based targets or performance-based work environment. I think some of the examples is in Rwanda, where you have performance-based contracts that are given to ministers, and this trickle down to even the departments, the ministries, departments, and agencies. And at the end of every year, you are remunerated, or your promotion is based on how much you have achieved your performance-based target or contract. The other is also corruption and nepotism. I think Prof also spoke about this. Maybe I will not spend some time. But what is important, what I wanted to say is that, is that there is this principle in economics called the maximum social advantage, where at that point, consumers or taxpayers are indifferent to the taxes that they pay, because the services that are provided to these consumers are almost equivalent to the taxes that they pay. So they see that there is a direct relationship between tax payment and government services. So if there is a mismatch, corruption is one that creates that mismatch. Also, another important challenge is the weak implementation of these labor laws. Capacity gaps are imminent. Political will is also sometimes very weak. You have this example of expatriate quota, in which it's only allowed for skills that are not provided in the Gambia, or skills that are not available in the Gambia. But you see this being abused for most of the time, and we do not have the capacity to be able to police and ensure compliance. So some of the recommendations that thinking on my own, some of the recommendations is to promote this culture, promote culture and morality seminars in workplaces. I have been thinking about this, and I said to myself, there's some, Vicente knows about this, that we normally have in some of our social functions. We have what we call seminars. So I'm thinking, maybe if you have these kinds of seminars in the workplace, in which people are reminded about some of the virtues of honesty, hard work, truth, excellence, in quarterly seminars where you invite traditional leaders, religious leaders to come and speak to employees. Say, for example, a department within the Ministry of Agriculture can organize these kinds of things. And maybe it's good to enlighten people about this, but it's just an example. Maybe there will be other ways in which people can continuously interact and be reminded about some of these virtues. Of course, having performance-based contracts at institutional and individual level, revision of the labor laws, because what is certain is that we are also developing as a nation, and there is continuously urbanization in this country. And that urbanized population is going to seek for employment. So targeting them is really very, very important. For me, I think it's really timely for us to look at this. Um, some of the policy developments that are taking place already that are being rolled out by the Ministry of Trade includes this formalization strategy. So they are developing a formalization strategy in which they want to put in a lot of these informal sectors or informal activities to become much more formalized. So these are some of the recommendations that I wanted to share with you. And maybe I end here. Thank you very much for this platform. Yeah, thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Raymond Jatta. Sorry, I actually had connectivity issues, and thank you for your intervention. Right. We've talked about compliance, accountability, and probity, and that was what Banna presented on. But you've also highlighted this issue of the labor laws not being known by many. So how can people be compliant when they have no idea about that which is contained in that document? So this is a challenge. To be honest, we have the financial instructions guiding a lot of people that are working for the civil service. How many people know these financial instructions? The general orders. How many people in the civil service are armed with the content of the general orders? So, and these are instruments that should guide us in our compliance, in our accountability, and being being honest or in our workplaces. So, thank you very much for your submission, and I really appreciate definitely all our panelists for your deliberation.